Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
Go above and beyond.
they become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%.
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
With Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. I have a very special guest today. His name is Perry Marshall. I've known Perry for probably 10 years. I was his customer for a long time. I still am. He's essentially a marketing guru and direct marketing. I read a number of his books, learned a tremendous amount from him about all kinds of subjects, marketing and otherwise. And I've watched Perry learn about evolutionary biology, put a book out on it called Evolution 2.0. And I've actually read this book with my kids as part of their homeschool curriculum, because I thought it was so important. And it's changed my way of looking at the world. It's changed my thoughts about biology. It was a huge inspiration for me to start this podcast and to interview literally 2,500 plus researchers and clinicians and scientists, all over the place. That's how important Perry's ideas are, and that's how important Perry has been to the scientific community, I think, and also to the marketing community. Perry is going to be putting on a conference called Cancer and Evolution. The website is cancerandevolution.org. It's going to be coming out October 14th to the 16th, 2020. So we got about a month left. He calls it the Cancer and Evolution Symposium. The first, I'll just read you the first sentence that I think will capture the meaning of it. It's, when we catch cancer early, we knock it out 3/4 of the time. But despite having spent $250 billion on cures, stage 3 and 4 patients' chances of survival are no better than 1930. And that's terrible. I probably everyone listening, if not themselves, someone they know has dealt with cancer, died from it, had chemo, radiation, surgery, etc. It's a huge topic. It's a vital topic. I'm very glad that Perry is going to be addressing it with his conference. And anyway, after that, welcome, Perry. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me on your podcast, and thank you for deciding to give the Cancer and Evolution Symposium some airtime. I'm really excited about this. So, yeah, let's talk about what we're doing and why would we want to do such a thing?
Yeah, I can say first from personal experience, I've had thyroid cancer myself. Luckily, it's probably one of the best ones you can get, if you could even say such a thing. It's like the Dos Equis commercial where the guy says, as if he would say, if I don't get cancer often, but if I did, I would have thyroid cancer. That's my bad joke. But a lot of people have, again, had terrible cancers that have killed family members. I've had family members I've lost to cancer. And I speak to a lot of scientists, and I hear just the same stuff over and over. The gold standard is radiation, chemotherapy, surgery. And it just doesn't seem like it's working. I see stats that show almost half of all men and 33% of all women will get cancer sometime in their lifetimes, and that's insane. So something needs to be done. And what's been your experience with cancer, Perry? Why are you interested in this topic?
Well, my dad died of cancer when I was 17, and I could recount the whole entire roller coaster of the first time he got it and the second time he got it, and the crying and the oh, he's going to get better, and oh no, the numbers are worse, and lots of us have been through that. My mom had a bout with colon cancer. She died of something else, but both of my parents had it. One of my dearest all-time best mentors died of pancreatic cancer in 2011. He was a very dear friend of mine, and in April, one of my very good friends, his wife Laura, she died of cancer, and she was a picture of perfect health, and she was a fitness instructor, and it went downhill very fast. And so in my book Evolution 2.0, there's maybe a couple of paragraphs where I explain that cancer is evolution running out of control. and that if we understand evolution, we'll actually understand cancer too. And I don't spend very much time on that in the book at all, but this circled back around over the last year. And I crossed paths with several people. One of them was Azra Raza, who you've interviewed, Rich.
Mm-hmm.
She's extraordinary. She's an oncologist at Columbia in New York, and she wrote a book called The First Cell. And her book, the title refers to the first cancer cell that appears in your body. And well, so what do we do about that? But her book is a very honest appraisal of the state of the cancer business, which is that we spent $250 billion and we're not any closer to a cure now than we were 40 years ago. And you're no better off now in stage 3 or 4 than you were a century ago. And so this is a problem. And so I got contacted last year by several gentlemen. Frank Laukien, who's the CEO of Bruker Corporation, James Shapiro, who is a geneticist at the University of Chicago, who also, Rich, you've interviewed him before.
Yeah, very smart.
And a gentleman named Henry Heng. And now evolutionary biology has been in a state of tremendous flux, especially in the last 5 years, because the old school Darwinism is basically on its way out. And old school Darwinism is the idea that evolution is a passive, gradual process that is mostly driven by natural selection. I have always believed that to be wrong. James Shapiro has always believed that to be wrong. And Henry Heng figured out purely on the basis of cancer research that couldn't possibly be right. The truth about evolution is that it is actively engineered by the organisms and by the cells. And when you take a bacteria or a mouse or a person and you put them in a tough situation, their bodies will engineer a response, and they can pass that engineering down to their offspring. This idea was considered laughable until about 15 or 20 years ago, when it started to become more and more apparent that there are multiple mechanisms by which this happens. Well, so Henry Heng started rethinking evolution entirely based on his cancer research and by studying tumors, because he found what would happen is that you nuke tumors with radiation and you kill 98% of the tumor, but the 2% that is left, it doesn't just mutate. It doesn't just accidentally mutate. It doesn't just generate a bunch of copying errors or anything like that. It develops massive wholesale restructuring of its own DNA, and it rebuilds its physiology. And it not only doesn't just do this once, it'll do 1,000 different versions of this, generating 1,000 different species of tumor in the space of a month or two. And now you have 1,000 species of cancer that you're fighting instead of one. And at that point, you're screwed. And
yeah, it's I guess one example that comes to mind is I imagine being attacked by an army. And as I shoot some of the army members, more of them start attacking, but some have, armor, some have swords, some have axes, some have halberds, some have guns. And the nature of the army that's attacking me continues to become more and more heterogeneous, and it's one army attacking, but there's so many different types of attack and invader that how could you ever defend against them all?
Exactly, it's guerrilla warfare, and think about it. When you attack an army, the worst assumption that you could make is those guys are stupid. And, that guy putting on his helmet or that guy getting out a machine gun, that just happened by accident. Or, if a terrorist bombs a mall down the street from you, it would be a really big mistake for you to go, I just think that was a random accident.
Right, yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, and this is the kind of thinking that has dominated evolutionary biology. And everything in evolutionary biology in some way affects people's thinking about cancer and disease and everything else. And so for basically 100 years, evolutionary biology vehemently denied that there was anything purposeful or intentional going on when organisms evolve, when in fact cancer is ultra high speed evolution right inside your own body. It obeys all the principles of evolution that control normal evolution, except it's like the dark twin. It's like the dark evil, like in cartoon books, you got like the good guy and his evil brother, the devil guy, like that kind of thing. You get that, like, it's like Darth Vader. Like Darth Vader once upon a time was a good guy, but he went over to the dark side. That's kind of what cancer is. But it's like, okay, so you have the same lightsabers, the same spaceships, the same lasers, the same weapons, only now they're just trying to hog all the resources and take everything out. And so Shapiro, Laukien, Heng, they said, you got two evolution guys and one cancer guy. And they said, we need to get all of the most advanced evolution people and all the most advanced cancer people, and we need to put them in a room. And so that's what the Cancer and Evolution Symposium.
Nice. So we're not going to hear about, for attendees, they're not going to hear about the latest surgical techniques or the newest chemotherapy protocols or, even more tightly focused radiation, but instead they're going to hear more of why is there cancer, how does it evolve? Why does it evolve? What are treatments that would actually affect it with this new understanding of it?
Yeah, it's almost like investigating the psychology of Viet Cong warriors, okay? And psychology might be like a little bit of an excessive metaphor, but, what are the processes that are used by cells when they are confronted with threats? Because like one of the things that Henry Heng has studied is called karyotyping, and karyotyping is the global structure of chromosomes. So everybody hears about genes, and everybody probably has at least some vague idea what DNA is. Well, if you take really long strands of DNA in large quantities, they are coiled into structures called chromosomes, and then human beings have 46 chromosomes, and so these are like very large, almost like silos of DNA. And what cancer and tumor cells do is they start. It's almost like breaking apart the silos and moving. So like you drive down the highway and you see those big farming silos. It's almost like, imagine taking a bunch of those silos, cutting them into sections, and then moving the sections around. Okay, so let's take section B from silo 2, and we're going to put it in section C of silo 19. This is
let me give you a quick example. There's a member of my family that had their genes looked at, and they have a transposition exactly like what you're talking about. This person, I'm not going to say who, but this person appears totally normal. They're middle-aged. They don't seem to have any problems, but I believe it's like chromosome 4 and 18 have parts that are switched, and this was identified. Yes. And yet they're alive. They're phenotypically normal, but there is this switching.
Right. And so genetics, and especially cancer genetics, has traditionally focused on genes and very granular, so like little tiny stretches of code. Karyotype analysis looks at like gigantic blocks of code, and so it is possible to do genome sequencing of cancer cells and and see a bunch of minute changes and not even recognize that massive global changes have just occurred. And so this caused Heng to realize that the entire version of evolution that he'd been taught in school couldn't possibly be right. And he went down a rabbit hole and he came up with other models, and then later found out that those same models were already in use by people who advocated an extended synthesis of evolution. Basically, people that said, no, we really need a different understanding of evolution. And so Shapiro came to the conclusion that if you want to understand evolution, you can actually understand it faster by studying cancer, than you can by studying fossils and all those traditional evolution things. And so we have got together some of the sharpest people in science. We have Bob Weinberg from MIT. We have people from Oxford, Harvard, Yale, Johns Hopkins, and I would describe them as blue chip renegades.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
They are parts of the best institutions in the world, but they disagree with a lot of the standard theories and models of how cancer works. And they recognize we're never going to solve it on the existing set of us.
Yeah, what are some of the, I don't know if you know everything, but the people that are going to be speaking at the conference, any juicy tidbits that really stick out at you that will be enticing for listeners to hear about, that'll make them want to come?
Yes. So right now, we are making 2-week advances in patient longevity, and those advances are being heralded as game changers, and companies are making $1 billion. Okay, and essentially all they're accomplishing is somebody suffers for 2 weeks longer. All right, Azra Raza talks about that extensively. In fact, I asked her, I said, so what was the reception when you wrote a book basically saying, with your entire industry that the emperor has no clothes? And she said, well, to my astonishment, I didn't get any blowback because they all knew it was true. And they all knew that they couldn't contradict me without looking stupid. Now, one of the interesting people that's speaking is Paul Davies. Paul is a physicist from Arizona State University, and maybe a decade ago, he gets a call from somebody at some cancer institute, and they go, Mr. Davies, we would like to hire you to do some cancer research. And he goes, I don't know anything about cancer. And she says, well, that's why we want to hire you. You're a physicist. Physicists are very good at getting to the bottom of problems. You're an above average physicist. We would like you to approach the situation with fresh eyes. And so Paul started working on this with some other people at ASU, including Kimberly Bussey. And they started studying the patterns in cancer mutations. And one of the things they discovered was there is a genetic pattern that is almost identical to something that you find in bacteria that are about 600 million years old. And they came to the conclusion that cancer is a very, very ancient built-in response to stress. And it's kind of like a cellular defense mechanism. And think of it like rebooting a computer. You know how if a Windows computer shuts down unexpectedly and then you start it back up, sometimes it'll start up in Windows safe mode.
Right. Yep.
Okay. He said by analogy, it's sort of like the cell goes into Windows safe mode and then it starts proliferating.
I guess it becomes somewhat stem cell like, and that allows it to then choose a path and go forward.
That might be about right. And so he concluded that that it is a natural biological response, and that we need to solve this at its roots rather than trying to go to war against it after the fact. It's almost inevitable that cells will evolve resistance to cancer therapies. And so whatever you do to them, typically they'll work really well for a little while, and then they'll stop working entirely because chemotherapy is stupid, but cancer is smart.
Right. Chemotherapy is not a living thing. It's just a small molecule drug that can only do what it can do, and cells are alive and can harness all kinds of abilities to adapt and evade. So, yeah, makes sense.
That's right. Now, Frank Laukin, he's one of the speakers, and he is going to be talking about the feedback mechanisms. Now, I'm an engineer, and engineers totally get feedback. So like feedback would be your thermostat in your house, or your cruise control in your car, or the system that gets a guided missile to where it wants to go, or the autopilot on an airplane. There are thousands of little feedback loops in the body and in evolution that determine what happens. And cancer is feedback driven. And so we have to understand the active feedback loops. And this is one of the reasons why the traditional Darwinian model has failed, because the traditional Darwinian model literally said that the only feedback loop is death. And that, you get all these mutations and death, survival of the fittest just sorts them out. Well, turns out that's not true. It turns out the cells are making course corrections all the time, and they're taking in all kinds of different information. And so there are fundamental information processes that we do not understand. And so this is why this is a very interdisciplinary conference. So, I'm an electrical engineer and I'm speaking, and Shapiro is a bacterial geneticist, and we have a bunch of oncologists. And Frank Laukien has a background in spectroscopy, and Paul Davies is a physicist. And I can go down the list of speakers, and I can't think of too many conferences that are about one topic that had this many different science is so siloed and it's so hyper specialized that everybody really has to take everybody else's word for it when they get outside their field. Well, somebody has to start asking, well, did the protein folding people actually get this right? And did the gene transposition people actually get this right? And did the geneticists actually get this right? Did the biologists get this right? And so you have to cross disciplines in order to do this. One of our speakers is Michael Levin, and he has a very strong background in biology and genetics and computer science. He has degrees in computer science. Michael's done incredibly fascinating experiments on frogs and tadpoles, where he subjects some of their cells to bioelectric fields. He is able to induce those cells to become cancerous, and then he changes the electric fields and gets them to revert back to standard cells.
Wow.
Okay, now this is a big deal. This is huge.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so don't you think that if he can do this with frogs and tadpoles, that he can probably do it with something else? And the first time I ever talked to him, I said, Michael, you haven't said anything about this in this video that you watched, but would it be fair to say that you do not agree with the standard model of evolutionary theory? He says, yes, that would be a fair statement. I would agree with that. Well, because the tadpole cells don't do what the standard models say that they would do. There's a speaker we have named Jin Sung Liu, who's from MD Anderson, and he has a fascinating presentation he's going to be giving about a three-way parallel between embryonic cells, evolution, and cancer cells. That there is a evo-devo, which stands for evolutionary development. There's an evo-devo process that the two have in common, but one is the dark twin of the other. So this is going to be really fascinating. I don't think I said this is going to be on Zoom. So you don't have to get on a plane and go to Boston. In fact, there was going to be a Boston meeting, but because of COVID, there's not. It's October 14, 15, and 16. It's on Zoom. It's 3 mornings in a row. The following week, we are going to have live Q&A sessions with a bunch of our speakers, and people can choose which ones of those that they want to attend. We're going to put it all on video, and it's the tickets are $25, $95, and $295, depending on whether like students and retired people are $25, and most people are $95, and if you're from an institution, then your organization can join for $295. So it's very affordable. It's at cancerevolution.org. And we're just really excited to be doing this. I think this is going to be a groundbreaking event. George Church, a leading geneticist at Harvard, is going to talk about some absolutely fascinating experiments that he's done. He's a rock star. He was on 60 Minutes about 10 months ago. They had a whole segment on his lab. So really excited to be doing that.
Who should come? How sophisticated and how knowledgeable do they have to be in order to get something out of the conference?
Okay, so this is presented at I would say you need decent familiarity with medicine or biology or a strong background in basic science in order for this to make sense. So I would not say this is just for any layperson, okay? But if you are familiar with the terminology in any of these disciplines, if you have any background in biology or medicine or evolution, it will make sense. And I want to remind you that in order for all of these researchers to talk to each other, because they are all in different fields, they do have to some degree speak in plain English. Okay, so this is not going to be saturated with the level of jargon that you would get at a standard cancer conference. Why? Because not everybody's an oncologist. So does that kind of give you a sense?
Yeah, that's exactly the level I try to dial in this podcast to. Like, people ask me, who's your audience? So I've realized it's curious amateurs that, again, have a familiarity with science, but they may not be in the particular field of the person I'm talking to, and they're willing to learn about another field. And then sometimes it is professionals in that field, and I find even professionals in the given fields, I'll ask 5 professionals one question, and they'll say no, and then a 6th one goes, oh yeah, we know about that, yeah. So,
right.
There's a big enough audience that needs to learn about this stuff for sure.
Right. So it's technical, but it's not ridiculously technical. Most of the presentations are 15 to 25 minutes long. In fact, the majority are 15. So, I think we've all heard the story of, Winston Churchill says, if I'm giving an hour speech, I got to prepare for an hour. And if I'm giving a 5-minute speech, I got to prepare for a week. It's one of those things. So the information will be very condensed. It will be very trimmed down to the bare essentials, and then people can dive deep. So if there's one presenter and you're really geeked out about what they're saying, you'll probably be able to get on a Zoom meeting a week or two later with them and a group of people and do live Q&A.
Yeah, that's excellent. The 2 things I've noticed, in my own journey is, one, it does take a bit of work. And at first you'll understand 10% or 30%. And as you go, you'll understand 60, 70, 80%.
Yes.
But these aren't concepts you could only see once and then, you got them. So you have to be exposed multiple times. So all reasons to attend.
Yeah, well, look, I can totally relate to being a little intimidated by this. I mean, 15 years ago, I went down to the rabbit hole in evolutionary biology, and I'm an electrical engineer, and all of a sudden I'm reading papers on biochemistry and molecular biology and stuff like that, and I probably understood 5 or 10% of what I was reading, but I could follow the logic of their argument even if I didn't always know what they were talking about. I could at least see the thinking process, right? And then I started to understand the terminology, and then it went from 10% to 20% to 30%. And, I think this is the kind of conference it's going to be valuable even if you only understand a third of what they're talking about. If there's a specific thing you need to know, then it's worth tuning in.
Yeah, and I'm saying this because I honestly believe it. I think your book, Evolution 2.0, would be a good primer for people. If they at least read a few of the chapters before they attend, that would help. Yeah, and then just talking about your journey, for instance, I've gone through the book about 5 times, myself a few, and then with my kids a few more. And it took that many times to really understand it more and get into it. And you wrote it at a very easy to understand level, but I just got a lot more out of it each time I went through it. So I encourage whoever's listening, don't be afraid of coming. Come, you will get something out of it. And this could be the start of a whole new path in your life or in your thinking, and whatever. If you're a researcher or a clinician, this may change how you run your clinical practice, or it may change how you do your research. But I think it's an important thing. I see a lot of researchers, because they've mentally siloed themselves. I see them as probably going on dead ends, a 10-year
Mhm.
dead end in their research, or at the very least, it being hindered because it just simply won't consider other things about what they do. And I think it's a big mistake.
Well, I agree, and we need more interdisciplinary conversations, and we need people that are going to ask "quote unquote" stupid questions. Like, I don't think there is a stupid question. I'm really excited to be part of this, and I think it's going to be a seminal conference. I think major connections and discoveries are going to come out of this. I was talking to somebody the other day, and chemotherapy is a nice $60,000 hit of crack cocaine for any hospital, financially speaking. Okay, and what if as a result of this research that is going on, what if somebody comes up with a $6,000 solution that works 2 or 3 times better? Well, then you're going to have a sales and marketing problem, which is, how do you replace a $60,000 product with a $6,000 product and not go broke? Well, that's a whole business analysis. But I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, we're not really going to be discussing this at the conference, but I think this is one of the challenges that does exist. It's an economic challenge because there's a system that's hooked on the drug of cancer treatment, and there are better, cheaper ways to get this done.
If you look at antibiotics, microbial resistance, I've heard directly from many researchers, there's no money in antibiotics because if you find one that works, the person takes it for 7 to 10 days, they're okay. That's not as good as them having to take a drug for life. So there's not enough money in it, and it costs you $1 billion to get through a clinical trial, or $2 billion, and you're barely going to make the money back. Big Pharma says, well, no good. We got to go for stuff that people will take forever. So it's really money. Money has warped science unbelievably, and I think a lot of people don't see it. It's very sad.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I know about numerous individuals who are helping put this together is they are not in this business for the money. They are interested in the science. They're interested in the humanity. They are interested in the struggles that people go through. I'll just finish up with a story. Azra Raza, people ask her, well, why did you write your book? And she says, losing my own husband to cancer wasn't enough to get me to write the book. She says, what happened was my daughter's best friend, went to the ER with I think he collapsed or something. And they found out he had inoperable, highly aggressive brain cancer. And they thought they were going to do surgery on him, and they figured out there was nothing they could do, and they just closed him back up. And he woke up, and they told him he had this horrible, aggressive cancer. And he says, oh, that's okay. My friend's mom will solve it. She's an oncologist. And, he went to her, and 16 months later, he was dead. She couldn't help him. And she just threw up her hands. She's like, my industry is in a pathetic state. I have to call attention to the fact that we are in a dead end here. We have to do something about this. And so she's one of our speakers, and I've become friends with her in the last year. She's a delightful human being, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from Azra. So cancerevolution.org is the sign-up page, and sign up and join us on the journey.
Yeah, thank you for all you do, Perry. I really appreciate you coming on this podcast.
Rich, thank you for devoting an episode of your podcast to our conference. I'm flattered that you're doing that, and look forward to seeing you on Zoom when the conference comes.
Excellent.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.